What's up, everybody? Episode 100 of Value Town. I'm ChanManV, and that's Noxious, back from Seat Story. And look who's here. We got the mayor back. What's going on, Trump?
Hey, good to be back for the special episode here.
That's right. Oh my gosh. It's been, 100 episodes. That's crazy. But we'll definitely reminisce a little bit today. But we got lots planned for you guys. Want to do something a little bit special, a little bit different than the norm. But we're still going to do a lot of the things that we normally do, just because you guys love it. That's Value Town. So we'll start off with our week in Hearthstone, what we've been doing, talk a little bit of Seat Story, decks we've been playing. Then we're going to go into our kind of end of the year awards, Value Town awards. We can talk about just our favorite decks and our card of the year, decks of the year, not dicks of the year. I don't know why I just said that, but
decks of the year. That's it. Yeah, dicks of the year. Let's do it.
Wow, this is amazing. And then life coach. Oh my god. But then we're going to do some Mekkatorque Workshop. We have a Patron that sent a couple more. Actually, the same guy that sent one last week. He's got just so many cards. It's amazing. And then we'll do some Patron Giveaways. Milestone again, guys. We still made the milestone. So Trump, actually, I didn't even get a chance to tell you. So we have a segment where we just smile for a good 30 seconds.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Get your best smile ready, Trump.
Yeah. This is my smiley face right here.
Oh, yeah. That's good.
That's good enough.
That's good.
We'll make that work, I guess.
Yeah, we'll definitely make that work. And then lastly, we'll do some Q&A, of course. Actually, not lastly, but we'll do Q&A. And then we'll end just more of the show segment of Value Town. And then we'll go into a show match that I have lined up, just again for this kind of special episode. We're going to have Firebat and RDU matching up and going against each other with a new format that we're trying out. It's more of a fun format, but it's going to a little bit of class drafts and banning too. So we'll explain it in more detail once we get started with that. But let's start the show. So our week in Hearthstone. Trump, what you been up to this week? Noxious, I know you've been at Seed Story. We'll talk about that in a second. But Trump, what you been up to?
Well, I imagine Noxious' story is going to be way more exciting. Well, I just did the usual. I'm ranking up with Reno Lock. Or ranking down, depending on how you want it.
How it goes that day.
Sounds like my experience, man. Okay, Reno Lock. All right, so no Jiraxis or Jiraxis? Which one? Which version? There's like two out there, right?
No Jiraxis. I think that's clear.
Yeah.
The good one, right?
The good one. Yeah, the good one. Exactly.
There are two versions. One of them is not good. The other one is really good.
And then there's everything in between. I think I was running a in-between one.
Okay, that's interesting. We've seen so much. Like, even if you look at Seed Story Cup, we saw 5 different builds of Reno Lock.
Yeah, and
that was just it's kind of interesting. Obviously, it's a tournament, so people can ban classes and then tech a little bit more heavily towards certain matchups. But
yeah,
overall, it was still cool to see that the Reno Lock matchup, not only in build but also in playstyle, was approached very differently by people.
Yeah, and that's cool too. I mean, one thing with Reno Lock for a while, once it. I think pretty early on when the release came out, Reno Lock just seemed very refined and finished already. But, in the recent 2 weeks, I would say, you're starting to see, just additional cards come in. Some people adding even more taunts. Some people, going a different direction, with maybe just a little bit more aggression or even some value. But in general, what do you think? What have you been going towards, Trump? Like more of a value type of Reno Lock or more protecting against aggro?
I can't say I've run all the versions yet, but I know at the start of it, I was running pretty much the greediest list possible, as always.
Yeah, of course.
So I was running even Cabal Trafficker, which was, some of you might not know what the Cabal Trafficker is since you've never seen it being played, but I was like, wow, that's so value. 6 mana, 6/6, draw a card each turn, and I don't even thin my deck. Fantastic. And 3 mana, 5/5. Wow, that's really good too. I was running that card. Jiraxis.
Every time I run the Trafficker, I get that card, that 5/5 card. It's like every single time.
I have an anecdote about that card. Day 1 of the expansion, Reno Lock comes up against me, just drops Cruel the Unshackled after Cabal Trafficker, brings out the 3-man, the Unlicensed Apothecary first, obviously, or alongside the rest, and then it just triggers all the demons, and he goes from 3 to 0, and he's like, that wasn't, the guy had won the game. If he didn't do this, 100% win. like I want to go, play the cruelty unshackled, and just dies. I couldn't help but laugh a little bit.
Wow,
It was a beautiful moment.
That's a Trollden moment for sure. That'd been awesome to see.
A similar thing happened to me. So Kazakus pulls up the resurrect all the time. So I was running the apothecary. You resurrect the thing. You also resurrect the 2 other things.
Oh no!
And that's how I lost against the Moss.
This is such a disaster.
Of course, it happens against a Moss, but that's crazy. I actually have never had that happen, like to my opponent or to myself. So that's pretty epic. Definitely crazy good. But yeah, Reno Lock is still obviously tier 1, and we definitely saw a lot at Seed Story. Speaking of which, Noxious, you just got back from Seed Story. I watched it. I wouldn't say a ton of it, but I definitely was trying to catch some matches like every time I had a chance, and it just looks like it keeps getting better and better. More, I don't know, just more stuff for you guys to do. Everybody looks just happier and happier every time. We have another Seed Story. So what was it like?
Yeah.
What was it like over there?
To be honest with you, like there was a lot of hanging downstairs and at the poker table, which sucked because this year apparently they couldn't have the poker table upstairs with the pros, hanging out with everyone, because I think Blizzard is overseeing the event a bit more and they're more involved, so they're trying not to have anything to do with gambling, right?
Stay away from gambling.
They say printing Yogg and Rag, but the thing is, one of the big things about the event though was that you didn't get to see too much of the pros like at the top of the on the top floor. So they were all downstairs playing, but everybody had a good time. Like the metagame is so much different than it was. I think a lot of it comes from the fact that, I mean, I won't even hide it. I think most people, even like I was talking to people over there, I thought I was the only one in that spot, but most people had just stopped playing the game. Like I had talked with a lot of people, and in the previous meta game, it turns out like a lot of people would log on, play 1 or 2 games, and just log the fuck out as soon as they could. The meta game prior to the one we have now was one of the most stale I think that we've had in the entirety of Hearthstone's history.
Oh, you mean before the
right? Not right now.
Oh, you meant now?
About not the current meta, just the one before that. Yeah. And the transition between both is a really refreshing change. And we see, like, aside from Hunter, every class is represented. And that's just a really feel good moment. Even though Grimy Goons Pally didn't pan out, anything can happen. Still works out.
Trump has a Grimy Goons Paladin to show today, so
surprise me, man. Do it. I want to see a good deck.
We could definitely debate it. Yeah, Trump. I know you were a little bit in that, but we talked a little bit at BlizzCon, and you're going through your Civ stream marathon, Civ 6 stream marathon. How have you felt since the expansions come out?
Yeah, I mean, I can completely understand Noxious's story there and how people would feel the same way as I did. I kind of skipped the last 1 month, I'd say, of the last meta. Took an opportunity to play Civ 6 instead. Civ 6 is really fun, but now that the meta is completely different now, I think this has been a really good expansion. It really broke all the current metas and moved in new stuff.
Yeah, definitely tons of cards, tons of different archetypes. Still got the usual suspects up at the top though, but at least we're seeing Priest obviously making a bit of a rise, and some different types of druid decks and whatnot. But yeah, so also Seed Story. So I know you guys had that whole gift exchange. What'd you get out of the gift exchange there, Noxious, or presents?
I got a singing Santa hat.
You didn't wear it. Where is that? I gotta see this.
I thought it would be great to give the kid, but I showed it to my kid as I came home, and he freaked the hell out. He was just like, "This is the scariest thing I've ever seen in my 10 months of life. Never again, Dad." And he just screamed at the top of his lungs. Like, I just terrorized him with the singing Santa hat. So I just relegated it to the closet there, and maybe I'll bring it out on special occasions when he's older. But he freaked out. Like, this was the scariest thing you've ever seen.
God.
Yeah, I don't know. Because it moved. It wasn't just singing. It moved. It wiggled. And I think the wiggle is what scared the kid.
Oh, my God. You know what that reminds me of? That reminds me when my son was, tiny, and he used to love Elmo. This is a kid, right? Baby. He used to love Elmo, right? Those Tickle Me Elmo things, a long time ago, right? He used to love that thing. So, one of the birthdays, I invited an Elmo guy, a person dressed up as Elmo, right? And so I'm like, oh, this is going to be so awesome. He's going to freaking love it. the Elmo shows up, and this is like a big part. We had like a bunch of his friends, you know, from preschool, and just a lot of people at our house. And the Elmo comes in, and all the kids are, "Oh, it's Elmo," or whatever. And my son just starts screaming like he's like deathly scared of him, and he just starts running. Literally, he starts running, and he like hides from it, like in his room. And we ended up, I mean, the guy was like set for like an hour. So he ends up just doing all the stuff with the other kids. And my son's like inside just definitely scared. That was super terrible, man. Kind of reminds me of that a little
Feels
bit.
bad.
Yeah, it definitely feels bad. But yeah, so anyway, Seed Story, getting back to that. You know, Orange, congratulations for him. You know, spoilers if you guys didn't watch the VODs.
It's too late now.
I'm so bad at that. People always like, "Jamie, why'd you fucking spoil it?" Jeez. But yeah, so anyways, congratulations to Orange. Show actually got to second place, and I think that was like really, really great for him too. He was I was watching his stream the other night. He was talking about how he was like nervous and stuff going into the finals and semis. So it's good to get a chance to see him in that kind of environment too, more of a competitive environment. Did you guys catch it much? Trump, you watched Seed Story much?
Not so much. I caught the gift exchange. That was the best part.
Yeah,
no, it's not the best. It was a really fun side thing. I'm glad they did it. It really, I think people gave Hearthstone players like appropriate gifts. Some people's gifts were really well thought out.
Yeah.
I really liked. Man, I can't remember.
E-Cop is in every
E-Cop, come on, dude.
That was a nice gag gift.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got some baby food. He got some salt and one other thing.
Yeah, I forget what it was, but might have been like a little kid's toy. I forget. There's like there's so
oh yeah,
honestly
some
like
beer to wash it all away. That's right.
Yeah, that's right. To wash all the salt afterwards and just feel better at the end of the event after losing, right? That's what someone said. it's such a troll gift. Like you probably lost by the point where now I'm giving you this. So
the Poppling book was really good.
Better.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good one.
The Poppling book was sick. It was so well done. Oh my god, the detail in that thing.
Who made that thing? Where they buy that thing somewhere? No, somebody made that, right?
Buy it, and he said that he found someone who could make it. So he got lucky, apparently.
Okay, all right. That was nice. Oh yeah, that's definitely good. You know, one thing I noticed though about Seed Story is that, you know, like almost every single event, right? After the match is finished, everybody always goes and shakes each other's hand and that sort of thing. This event was the first time, like, and they never shook hands. It was like the most awkward thing.
They did a few times, but not like 100% of the time. Yeah.
Yeah, because you know the winner always went to the couch, right, to talk. But they'd always show like the loser walking off like towards the side, and it
like
was
the saddest thing.
Yeah, it's kind of an awkward face.
Here's this miserable guy. Let's follow him with the camera, and you just like see him pan out of the screen, and leave.
I hear an echo somewhere just with us. I'm not sure which one.
Might be Trump's speaker.
That's me.
Yeah. But anyways, yeah, it seemed like a really great event, and almost everybody. I mean, it's just a lot of people. I felt like were there. Any cool decks that you got a chance to see, Noxious, or might have surprised you?
Well, I mean, every deck was kind of new in a way. I mean, even if you were familiar with the ladder, at least now you had like a really good picture of it. Mm-hmm. The coolest deck was actually one that I crafted on day one, and I'm sad to say it didn't go through. But Amaz's, Coon Cthulhu deck. So that was he playing I don't think he was playing the Cthulhu version. I think he was playing the Malagos one. Sorry.
Yeah, that was the popular one.
Amaz Malagos, and Savis was running Cthulhu Kun, and that deck is some of the most fun you can probably have in this expansion right now, I'd say. Unfortunately, the metagame is quite fast, and even the decks that are slow are tempoing you down quite hard if they get the right curve. Like, you play a lot of Reno Log Trump, like, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If I give you time to establish tempo, I'm out of it. Like, I will just lose the game to your board at some stage. And like, Cthulhu Druid isn't exactly known for its comeback potential. So if you get pushed out of the mid game, it gets really ugly really quick.
It can come back if you have Malagus.
One Mulch Tops, if you even do.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
That 4-mana 8 kills you in like 4 turns.
It's pretty crazy. It's amazing. I actually have a Cthulhu Druid that we're going to talk about in a second too, so we can definitely dive into that. Any other OTK decks you guys saw during the, or did you see any OTK decks or anything outside of the
Anything can happen,
well, of
Paladin,
course,
but
of
that's
course.
the closest thing to it. With Finja, of course, getting a lot
What do you
better.
guys think of Finja? You guys like Finja a lot?
It's a sick card. Yeah, it's really good.
It
It's a
is,
really good card.
it is super good. I don't know. I just my experience with it, like at least with the Anyfin one, I don't know. I mean, it helps sometimes, but you still have to have all the Anyfin cards for you to be able to pull it off. So
I've seen Purple actually tweeting about some
yeah,
experiment he
me
was
and him were
doing with
talking about
Finja.
it. Yeah, we were just adding Finja to every single deck and seeing what would happen, and
Yeah.
it's interesting for sure.
I'll say something though about Finja is he's basically a fair version of what patches should like try to be, right? Like if you look at it that way, they're both doing the like Mad Scientist, this card, they all kind of have one thing in common, which is bring stuff out of your deck, play it for free.
Yeah.
And Patches just does it in the most unfair manner. Scientist is just right next to it in terms of cost. The earlier it happens, the more difficult it is to handle.
Right.
And Finja says, I'm a 5-man at 2/4. If you can't handle me, you can't handle anything anyway. So
right.
it's one of those situations where they created a fair card that fetches and plays cards for you automatically. Like it's kind of insane that they would print it alongside patches. Like the discrepancy in application is really intense.
All right. Well, unpopular opinion alert.
Oh, here we
If
go.
Patches is a fair card.
Yeah, it is.
No sarcasm.
No, I agree. I agree.
Patches
It
is
is.
a well-designed and fair card.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Unpopular opinion alert.
No, I don't think it's. I think most people agree with you. It's just like most people forget that small time Buccaneer is a thing, and they're like, Patches sucks, and it's like, no. How about that 1-mana Flame Imp neutral card that sucks?
Well, okay, so all right, I'm gonna play obviously the opposite end here. I think if you look at it by itself, Patches is a fair card. The problem is what you're playing with it right now, and that's where it's just like, oh gosh, it's I wouldn't say it's like crazily OP, but it is overpowered. It's not like kid ourselves here. That turn 1 where you can do anywhere from 2 to 4 damage range wise is crazy. I mean, and not to mention the tempo that you get out of it, right? But is it crazy OP? No, but it is overpowered. I mean, of course it's overpowered, right?
Okay, let's assume it is overpowered.
Draconic Operative is overpowered.
Right, exactly. You know how Draconic Operative is this, like, it's such an interesting card because it is so far above budget on everything, yet it doesn't make Pre's broken. It just kind of creates this really powerful deck that doesn't break the game. And Patches could be that if only Small Time Buccaneer wasn't in neutral. And what's more, I think the most aggravating part about the whole pirate package is that because it's a thing in neutral, and because Paladin's Last Justice is outclassed by Spirit Claws, and their Argent Lance is outclassed by Jade Claws, and because Hunter has no weapon before turn 3, you've basically pushed out 2 classes outright, just because Small Time Buccaneer is a thing with Patches. And that's the only gripe I have with that package. And it's not even the patches that bothers me in that package. It's just the fact that Buccaneer is not a rogue-specific card. Like, that's it.
Well, it's not even that, though, right? It's because Warrior has N'Zoth's First Main, and it's because Rogue has Swashbuckler. If they didn't have those, then Patches wouldn't even be a thing.
Good point, yep.
That's why Paladin, like, if Paladin got a 1-mana pirate that was playable, then they'd play Patches, probably. And maybe Small Time Buccaneer. Maybe.
I mean, I played Egg Druid with Mark of the Wild.
Yeah, that's
and everything.
fun.
And I actually played Bloodcell Corsair to get Patches as a better living roots. I mean, holy shit. Like, this was so mind-boggling when I realized it. I'm like, I can get a better living roots if I just play Corsair, and it works against weapon classes. Like, that's how insane the card is.
I played against a guy that had 2 of them. Actually, he played 2 of them and played that package. It was definitely interesting. But
I think that's where it starts to get really interesting. It's such a card that you can build around that you might even put a card like Bloodsail Corsair into a Druid deck. I'm not even saying that's good. It could be terrible, and it probably is terrible, but it is worth considering.
It is at least interesting, right? Like the Reno lock with Bloodsail Corsair to get the extra coil from JJ and Life Coach. We saw so much, actually, of Patches in the event. I guess, like, on the bad side of Patches, it is a card that doesn't say, I'm Yogg Saron, but it's a card that says, here's this 12 to 16% chance you start with me in your hand, and here's a loss for you. And it's just terrible, terrible variance. It's too good not to include, but it's too, like, it's so irritating to be commentating a match and you're like, all right, we've got these exciting decks and you know the back and forth of the aggro mirror.
Right.
Fuck, the guy starts with patches, rip, this game is over, let's move on. And it's just, that's the one thing I dislike about it.
So did we the one
That's
thing
fair.
the one thing about the patches in the Buccaneer and all the things that were added is I think we do have the fastest decks ever in Hearthstone aggro wise. Would you guys agree with that statement? I mean, maybe Undertaker is still very, very close, but at least from the standpoint of face, just like pure face, very little value trading. It's increased like by, you know, because literally the arms warrior or the crazy aggro warrior that was obviously super popular in the first week, there was nothing different except for those two cards for the most part. I guess maybe frothing, but for the most part there were a lot of the same cards. So do you guys think that it was necessary for us to increase the speed of aggro decks, given that, you know, mid-range has obviously been dominating for the last meta, and control obviously got a buff too this release? Was it necessary in your guys' mind
To accelerate aggro?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, if Reno decks were going to be a thing, then yeah, I think. I mean,
Right.
if there's choices between decks that heal themselves to full and never die, and we just go to 30-minute games no matter what, and, you know, maybe a bit more aggro to pressure them, then I think it's healthy that we have a predictable aggro deck.
You agree, Sean?
Unpopular opinion again, at least according to the masses. I don't think this one might be that unpopular with the pros, though. I think it's fine for aggro decks to get some power. When I reviewed this set, I was like, okay, so aggro decks get like one card, they get patches. I think that's what most people do. Of course the meta is going to slow down. I mean, small-time Buccaneer, I think most people thought it could be good, but most people didn't know it was going to be good. And then they tried it and it was good. It's not that egregious, and without that check and balance, everyone would be playing a Reno deck. And it's good that the meta is varied. And also, I do think that the aggro deck is fair. As unfair as it can seem sometimes, it is actually fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you can tech against it, like specifically against it if you want to. You can't beat it 100% of the time, but you know, you can beat it 70% of the time. You know,
I'll even add that Blizzard probably had the foresight to know that patches was going to be a thing. They put second-rate Bruiser in the same deck, in the same expansion, which is clearly so patches is a card that makes like the opponent have two cards out, so you really consistently get a 3-mana 4/5. You even have that new 1-mana 2/2 anti-aggro card. So they put good aggro tools and good anti-aggro tools in the same set. They even put like friendly bartender in case that wasn't enough.
Yeah, I tried actually the friendly
tried that one
bartender.
yet.
I mean, it didn't make the cut for me, but it's one of those cards that you have to try and then see whether or not it's a fit to slow them down, because they have to basically like it heals you for 1 and it tanks 3, so it's effectively a guaranteed 4 damage off your face, you know, more often. Sometimes it soaks up more. But the point is, like, Blizzard, I think this is a metagame they crafted ahead of time. Like, I feel like, you know how Magic the Gathering, the devs usually come up with the decks, maybe not the exact list, but they have a very good idea of what the metagame's supposed to look like before they release a set.
Yeah.
Occasionally you have the Skull Clamp disaster where they just didn't think about it and then everything goes wrong. But for the most part, they know what's going to be coming out. And this set seemed like it was engineered. In a way, not 100%, but for the most part. And that feels good, because right now when I lose games, barring, you know, the occasional RNG fiesta, I'd say that most of the stuff I face off against is predictable. And this is like the first time in Hearthstone that I felt that way in a long time. Aside from the mid-range Shaman Mirrors last meta, like that's one of the first times.
Okay, so what do you say? I mean, I totally get what you're coming from, and part of me does like that too, just like the meta in that state. But there's definitely the opposite camp, which really, you know, they label this meta as more of a rock paper scissors meta, and you know, because of that, you have predictability from this exact deck, but that deck just happens to be better than your deck, so you just kind of know what the outcome is going to be, and you know, they don't have fun doing that. What do you say to those folks?
Well, 60-40 or 70-30 isn't 100%, right? Like, this is the reason it's a card game. There's no rock paper scissors because you can still win. at the end of the day against those bad matchups, and that's why you should still play them out.
Yeah.
It's not like we don't currently have, unless I'm mistaken, a freeze mage control warrior situation. Like when a matchup is favored in the current environment, it feels like it's 70-30 at most. Like I've rarely seen decks that just go, oh yeah, I'm 90-10 in this matchup. It's like 50-50, 60-40, 70-30 at the very best with a heavily
Jade
taxed
Druid
deck.
versus Control Warrior.
But that's just not played, right? Like it's not even a thing in the metagame. It's just non-existent.
Sometimes it happens. But yeah.
So like my point is that yes, it's a rock paper scissors meta in that way, but is the healthiest metagame we've had in a long time. For
Agreed.
all the hate that I would like to give the patches and pirate package for the fact that it's so ubiquitous, I just love the way the landscape of the metagame is looking like.
Okay.
Yeah.
These people have no idea what they're talking about. All they have to do is go to Vicious Syndicate or any stat reporting site and then look at the matchup reports. And like Noxious said, like at worst, really, it's 70-30. A lot of people, like, I've seen some Reddit posts come up and they're like, what would be the perfect meta? And then, like, generally people think, okay, I want a deck that, like, maybe I don't want a rock, paper, scissors meta. I want something that's maybe slightly favored, maybe like 60%, maybe like, okay, sometimes it has to have some unfavored matchups, like 40%. I want some aggro, I want some control, I want some mid range, I want some combo. That's exactly this meta. Like, what do you guys want? This is
This is the meta.
You know what's crazy?
This is the perfect meta.
What's crazy is I was talking to Purple like a few days ago because we were talking about just the I was kind of bouncing off ideas for the format for the show match later. And we ended up talking about the meta, and he's definitely in that boat, that kind of rock, paper, scissors boat. And he was like, he even went to the point where the previous meta he actually thought was better. Just having Shaman, even with Shaman being, I mean, I think most people think that it was an oppressive deck because it had a positive winning percentage against so many different decks in the meta. Actually, everything except for one, I believe it was. If you looked at the versus Syndicate. And I don't know, he was basically saying that, yeah, those matchups were positive, but they weren't positive by much. And it's good when there is, I guess, a deck that is dominant, versus having, just a bunch of different ones that just happen to beat each other in a triangular fashion.
Sure.
I mean, there's an argument to that too. I mean, but at this, I personally was tired of that, just literally seeing Shaman after Shaman after Shaman being played. So, I think it is healthier to have more classes being played, but there's definitely some pro players that look at it that way, and that's kind of an interesting way to look at it because I think most people do have a negative connotation or they have a negative feeling about what the previous meta was.
Yeah. I will say this though, mid-range Shaman mirrors were very skill intensive, and there are decks in the current meta. I'm gonna look at you, Dragon Priest and Jade Druid, that kind of play themselves, and they have a very good win rate overall, right? Like they're just very good decks for the amount of effort that goes in. And I think the aggro mirror, like a Pirate Warrior versus Pirate Warrior, is a little bit more nuanced than people look at it. Initially they just think it's go face all the way, but it's not completely true. So there is some nuance in every matchup, but some decks do feel a bit linear. But the thing is, you're not forced to play these decks to succeed right now. Right now, the best deck isn't the autopilot deck, and that is just a good thing. You can play a deck that plays itself, but you may not do as well as if you had played a teched out Reno list with a bit more nuance to just the gameplay of it and the flow. So the fact that that's true right now is amazing to me, and I'm one of the most like trigger happy complainers of metagames. Like I metagame, and I will tell you, I will be the first to complain about it, because I don't like staleness. And I feel like right now, despite the fact that some decks are dominant, we see a bit of everything, and that just feels good.
Yeah, definitely. Well, why don't we, instead of talking about meta, why don't we look at a few decks that we brought here? And why don't we start off with Trump's deck, since it's a Paladin, which we haven't talked about Paladin much except for the Murloc deck. But this one is not a Murloc deck. This one's actually more of I would say a grimy Goons variation that has a lot of buffs in it and lots of the grimy Goons cards in it. So Trump, why don't you walk us through this deck?
Yeah, I'd say this is definitely the big flavor of the expansion, at least for Paladin. This is probably what the Hearthstone team had been looking for in terms of a grimy Goons deck. And you can actually kind of see that when you look at the pre-constructed deck of Hearthstone. In fact, this expansion came up with like pre-constructed decks, and it just had general class flavor for all of them. You had like a Dragon Priest, you had buff class cards, you had some Jade stuff.
Yeah.
But anyways, this one, it plays up to the Grimy Goons mechanic, specifically of the Paladin, quite a bit by literally running 28 minions in it. The only non-minion is Smuggler's Run, which is the one that buffs all your minions. Doesn't even run True Silver Champion because it's not a minion. So this takes it to the extreme. I thought about running Pyromancer, thought about running Quality, thought about running True Silver, but I was just like, okay, every single thing that I don't run, I have an increased chance of adding +1/+1, since the Grimy Goons Paladin mechanic is giving +1/+1 to all your minions. So you buff all your minions, they're all stronger, you play them all, and in theory, you run a few of the minions that are fast, such as Argent Horse Rider, which acts as the True Silver Champion, and you have the Elder Peacekeeper and Keeper of Oldemon, which is like a spell. You have the Oozes, you have the Sunfury Protectors for anti-pirate. So I think I made this. It's not as anti-aggro as you could, because there's definitely a nod towards. I had to rein in my greed, I guess, is what I have to say.
Yeah,
I
know how it
have
feels.
some semblance of chance against Pirate Warrior and Pirate Shaman that I put in the 2 Oozes, I put in the 2 Sun Furies. But without that, I had greedier versions before. So
how does it do against the aggro decks?
Terribly. There's a good reason why this isn't being played right now. It does still. I haven't tested this particular version that much. This is the most anti-aggro version, but I thought it had a decent chance. This strikes me right now in its current incarnation as probably something like a 45% against the meta deck. It's not good, but it's not terrible, and maybe this could be a direction for Paladin if someone figures out something to make it great. This is like the fan favorite deck of mine. Everyone wanted me to try this, probably because Paladin is the underdog right now, and because this is such an interesting mechanic. You get 2 buffs on your fight promoter, and the 6 mana 6/6 draw 2 cards. It's not even really working towards it because you're buffing every single card in your hand. So the fight promoter is just like a bonus, and then you have the Doppelgangster, which I know Noxious reviewed as possibly one of the most meta warping cards in the set initially. It didn't end up being that, probably because the buff cards didn't end up being that. They ended up being a little too slow for this meta, but it had the potential. Like,
still has the potential.
In an alternate warp world, maybe Doppelgangster is running the entire meta. Maybe.
Yeah, and I feel like I'm looking at your list right now, right? Yeah. I'm looking at your list, Trump, and I built this exact deck almost. I mean, it's a little bit different, but this deck was basically card for card the same as mine, except you went even deeper on the minion based stuff. Like I had True Silvers, you put in Bruisers. You have Sun Furies and Oozes, where I had like Blubber Baron and some other jank, because I was just like going all, and Keeper of Uldamon, I think. So I was just going for the like the more typical Paladin build, and it felt like it was just running out of steam. But the thing is, when this deck goes well, you just can't stop it. It's just a complete rollover. Like, you just roll over people. The wins don't seem like they're even close when you do. It's just like, all right, you're dead to my 3 mana 7/7. Good luck.
Yeah, I've definitely built a version of this too. And what I found, and I mean, I was trying all kinds of, I mean, I even throw Doomsayers at one point, because the one thing that I noticed was if I get board control at any point, I win like 60-70% of the time. And, you know, against the aggro decks, you just can't. I mean, outside of running into Doomsayer, outside of maybe a Pyro, you know, that might work with some of the, you know, the Smugglers runs, and I don't even know what the other spells are. Maybe you can clear that and still get a minion down, but that was the biggest issue. I just couldn't do both. And if you're just behind, you're just dead. Like, you just will never catch up, especially when you don't have Consecrate or anything like that in the deck. So, man, but when you do get the lead, it's crazy good. And I even tried, you know, like, I replaced a lot of these things with Dragon, because I just felt like Dragon makes sense too. But even Dragon, there's just not enough early Dragons for Paladin to, you know, get control, you know, turn 3, turn 4, and then you just end up getting run over still. So it was, it's tough. It's really close though. It's actually pretty close to being like a zoo deck, something that's really good, but it's not there yet.
Yeah, I think Murloc Paladin had the potential to be like the next zoo. I tried Murloc
Just
Paladin
dies
like
so easily.
I
though.
tried, and the thing is, it wasn't like when it worked again, same concept. It just does things it shouldn't. And I think Paladin's in this weird limbo, and it's been like this since the beginning of Hearthstone, where it can have removal and good board presence without card draw, or it can have card draw and good board
Right.
presence
One or the
without
other.
removal. It can
Yep.
have like 2 or 3 things, but it can never splash in a bit of the other stuff they're missing. It just can't. It's just never had that chance.
You
Which
used to
is
have
why
muster
the
for battle.
challenger,
You used
Yeah, I
to
wouldn't say never. There was that moment in time where mid-range Paladin was really
right?
muster for battle.
Yeah, muster
Yeah.
for battle was huge for that. But muster for battle was probably one of the most compared to generally speaking from Paladin. I think one issue is that there's not very many dynamic cards. They're very one-dimensional. Like it wasn't until we got just a few cards, right, that actually allows you, like muster for battle gives you a weapon so you can remove and add to the board, or we get some heal cards, right? You can get a 4/4 on the board and then you can also heal yourself. We don't have that many of those type of cards in Paladin, and it makes it difficult sometimes to be able to combat some of these other classes that do have a richer tool set.
I mean, muster for battle versus patches, right? Like, you look at small time Buccaneer into patches, and you look at muster, you're like, well, this kind of mimics it, like card for card or stat for stat, and it's just painful to look at because you realize just how vicious the card is.
You have Light's Justice, but you don't have 1/1. You know what I mean?
I mean,
So
I'm
it's
so sad because I really
sucks.
tried to make Pirates work in Pally, and even in the event that I play like double Buccaneer, double small time and double South Sea deckhand, and I always get patches on turn 1. The fact that I can never buff my Buccaneer aside from Light's Justice is like the most crippling thing in the deck.
Yep, that's a good point.
Yeah,
All
and
right.
that's one thing to like point out for those despairing about those pirates out there too. Like maybe you just don't play it, but sometimes they do not get the perfect draw or don't get a good draw, and they get the Buccaneer and they don't get to buff it because even Warrior only has the Nizal's First Mate, and they have upgrade and they have Fire War Axe. That's 6 ways. The upgrade isn't ideal, but sometimes they miss, and the Pirate Shaman is even harder because they don't have the upgrade. They have Spirit Claws and they have the Jade Claws. So they miss all the time. And the times that it feels really bad is when they don't miss.
Yeah, well, they do miss, but if you notice, the classes that are doing well right now in the meta, when they do miss, those classes actually have answers for the Buccaneer. If the Buccaneer comes down, they have like a Living Root. They have a War Axe, or they have just whatever it is, right? Just that removal. But Paladin doesn't. Paladin doesn't have that ability so they actually get multiple chances at it when it comes to Paladin, and that's tough. Okay, well, that's a good start. That was a great deck, Trump. Why don't we talk about more, just I guess more the normal decks that we've been seeing, and some of the decks I've been playing here. So Dragon Priest, right? I don't think we've gotten a chance to actually look deeply into Dragon Priest. Pretty straightforward, and actually I didn't get a chance to one thing with the last deck. I just want to go through it for our audio listeners. Just a real quick run through of it. Lots of pairs, so I'm just going to kind of name them. Mean Streets Marshals, Smuggler's Run, Swamp Ooze, Grime Street Outfitter, Sun Fury Protector, like Trump was talking, Acolyte of Pain, Aldor, Argent Horse Rider, Bran, Wicker Flame, Keeper of Alderman, Doppelgangster, Grime Street Enforcer, Second Rate Bruiser, Fight Promoter, Don Honcho, Ragnaros Lightlord, and Tyrion at the end. Yeah, so just a quick rundown for the audio listeners. But then, okay, so now we have this Dragon Priest. Pretty straightforward Dragon Priest. Your typical Dragon Priest, I would say. The only question, or maybe the 2 cards to talk about really, are just the last 2 cards that you see there, which are Holy Fire and Ysera. And I want to kind of get your opinions on just the Dragon Priest, because I played a lot with it, had about mixed results with it, and a lot of Dragon Priests right now top out at Operative because they use the Historians as a way to get like Ysera if they need it, and instead of just adding it to the deck. What do you guys think? What do you guys think is the best Dragon Priest right now? One that just tops off at Operative, or one that maybe needs just a little bit more value against decks like Reno Lock?
I'll let Trump answer because he's probably more well-positioned than I am to speak about how difficult, like what are the more difficult builds to beat as Reno Lock.
Sure. Wait, Dragon Priest is hard to beat as Reno Lock?
No, I'm asking like, what does the priest need that extra top end to beat you,
I see.
or does it not matter at all? And they'd rather just be more aggressive, basically.
The way that Reno Lock has been going is they have been moving steadily away from trying to beat Priest because they have been beating Priest so handily that they're like, okay, we can lose a few percentage points here by taking out Jiraxis, by taking out the Hellfire Potion, by taking out a Shambler. So Reno Locks keep moving away from trying to beat Priest, and eventually Priest is like edging up, not because the Priest does anything, but because the Reno Lock disrespects them. Because that's the way the meta goes. Like, you don't need to beat a deck that isn't around that much. So Dragon Priest, despite getting the Draconid OP, is not that good, surprisingly, because it still doesn't win against really aggressive decks that often, which is a surprise considering they have a 1 mana 2/3 and a 2 mana 2/4.
It's not a terrible
3 mana
matchup,
3/7 maybe, and then a 4 mana 3/6 with Taunt. It ends
yeah.
up, even if you go that curve, you might still lose. And even with the Potion of Madness is actually really good.
Yeah, it's extremely good. Yeah.
That is why Priests have sometimes been cutting out that heavy end, because they need even more tools to beat the Pirates. So Ysera, Holy Fire, for example, Entomb, those don't really make that. I found that this is my personal opinion, I found that the best version of Dragon Priest is Reno Dragon Priest.
Yeah.
Because you get the addition of 2 very powerful cards of Kazakis, which you already run Brand for, and you get Raza, which is a really, really powerful card. You do lose Draconid Operative, which is a really good card, and you lose Nether Spy Historian, which is a really good card. You lose a bunch of like good, solid cards, but I feel that the addition of some really strong cards such as Reno and Raza make it up. This particular version of Dragon Priest looks solid, though I would strike it as maybe like a 50% against the meta deck. It's okay.
Yeah, it's a little bit over. It's probably like 55, I'd say, but you're not going to be climbing very fast with it. And I mean, I think all those points are correct. There's a lot of people asking about why isn't the Dragonfire Potion in this deck? And it's because Dragonfire Potion.
Wow, I didn't even notice that. That's like one of the better cards in theory.
It's not that great though in the current meta. That's the problem. Like,
it's just not hitting anything.
Yeah,
right?
and Azure Drakes are in a lot of decks too, so you're just not even clearing that. And when it comes to playing this deck, you just want to keep building upon the advantage you get or the value that you're getting on board, and mitigating that. Sometimes you go crazy because there's no removal like against a druid, or sometimes you hold back against whatever deck, but you want to be in control of that. And with Dragon Potion or Dragonfire Potion, you're not adding to it, you're just removing. So it's almost like resetting a turn, and that generally isn't good for Dragon Priest because Dragon Priest has a timer. Like, it's only good in the first like 16 turns, 15 turns in a game. If you haven't gotten, in position to win the game by that time, you're just going to lose because there's just not enough value in it. The Operative can be amazing, but it can whiff too, right? And
it's kind of hard to miss, but
you whiff against aggro. Like, aggro never gives you anything good, but you have to play it anyway.
Sure, but I mean, that's like, I think you whiff even more when you have Ysera, right? Like, I feel like this build is, I mean, maybe it's favored against like Control Shaman. Like, I'm gonna go to that extreme where like that extra card just gives them another hex target, and you've probably been able to do their dirty stuff with your Nether Spy Historians. But like, not having double Cabal Talon Priest is really tough to handle just having the early game consistently. Like, between Ysera and Talon Priest, what do I want in the current meta? I'd be edging towards the Talon Priest, and even Blackwing Tech as a one of, right? Like, that's the other card that your Ooze can sometimes be replacing. Holy Fire is probably replacing. Like, that extra array of 3-drops that isn't like double death or Brand on an empty board is oftentimes necessary right now to transition into a win.
Yeah, I've definitely tried Blackwing Tech too, and it is definitely it's torn between the two, but I think in the end Talon Priest is better, just because when it does, when you do keep a Worm Rest agent on the board, and give him that buff to 2/7, he does stay on it for a long time. You can just beat aggro sometimes with it.
Have you tried the Argus? Because there's a list, like I think one of the most common builds right now.
I've seen that too.
You cut Fire, you cut Ysera, and you just play a Defensive Argus. 2 Talon Priests, and maybe a Blackwing Tech instead of the Ooze, depending on how much
Yeah,
you're
that could
hating on
work
those
too.
Arcanite Reapers.
Yeah, that could be definitely a good thing to try. But yeah,
and that's not necessarily that's a much better against aggro list.
Right.
Not necessarily making the deck overall better. It depends on the meta. But given this meta where there are a lot of Pirate Warriors and Shamans, I do agree that seems like the better choice.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's move on, and wanted to talk about the Coon Druid, since it was pretty popular at Seed Story, and this one particularly is Show's version that he was playing, at least the other night. I don't know if this is the exact same version he played at Seed Story or not, but...
It's the Malagos list, I see.
Yeah, it's a Malagos list, and I actually like the Malagos list better, too, and I remember, I think I was watching Dog's stream like a week or two ago too, and he kind of went in depth with talking about it too. It's just a little bit faster. It's, I think, a little bit better at removing or just dealing with aggro too. And so I do like this. This deck's really fun to play. If you guys like want to just try out something different and you've never played any Aviana type of druid, this one is like extremely fun, and there's some amazing plays you can make. The most obvious one is obviously the Aviana into Coon, into Malagos, into Faceless, and then whatever burn you have left. Sometimes the biggest challenge sometimes, guys, is just keeping a burn just so you can finish somebody at the end. But even just putting all those minions on the board, you can just win games purely on just big bodies on the board. And actually, you probably win games more because of that. But have you guys played this deck at all? Either of you?
I've played a ton of the Cthulhu Coon list, like a ton of it. And like this list strikes me as interesting because he's running double Mulch and double Mire Keeper. And I've seen a lot of these lists go like 1 Mire Keeper, 1 Mulch, double Feral Rage, and a 1 Raven Idol, right? Like just the one extra way to cycle cards with Gadgetzan, get maybe an extra burn spell for the late game. And this deck is also running double Druid of the Claw, double Ancient of War. And the Coon Cthulhu version doesn't really need to do that because it's running the Dark Arrow Koas as kind of like default mid-game taunts, and the Disciple of Cthulhu in the early game as defensive plays. So oftentimes you're like the Malagos list, I feel, is better positioned against aggro when Moonfire is present. But the moment you take that out, then suddenly I don't know how much better it really is because you're losing Disciple and your ramp isn't that much more exciting.
Okay, well, the ramp is definitely faster with Mire Keeper. I mean, if Cthulhu doesn't have, I mean, Mire Keeper is huge for me. They're
two of it's insane.
Yeah, it's actually the Wild Growth Mire Keeper turn that happens a lot. You know, and getting to obviously Ancient of War, or even just getting to Coon faster and getting the 10 armor is great too. So just generally picking when to ramp and when not, and when to actually remove early game is probably the biggest decision that you have to make with it. Trump, have you played this deck at all?
I haven't played. I like Noxious. I mostly played the Coon Cthulhu, but that's not necessarily because I think the version is better. I just didn't have enough time to try this one either. There are a lot of decks to try out. The
there really is.
Next month, when the ladder resets again, I'll probably be trying all the ones I missed. Let's see. This list looks like a very conscious effort to make an attempt to beat aggro. Between the 2 Druid of the Claws and the 2 Ancient of Wars, and the 2 Mulches for the 4-mana 7/7s. So, and against Handlock, for Reno Lock.
Reno Lock. I don't know if we should even call Reno Lock anymore. Like at this point, Handlock and Reno Lock are merging together into this one blob. But I've been surprised by the Handlock that's disguising itself as Reno Lock. It's happened to me on ladder a few times. The guy goes like tap tap Giant Drake, and I'm like, all right, we're done with the big threats now. And then Giant, I'm like, oh shit, something's going down, and then I just get destroyed because I didn't apply enough pressure early. I feel like you need double Feral Rage to handle Frothing Berserkers in the current environment. Like that card is power. Like if there's any powerful card in the Pirate Dragon Warrior, it's got to be the Frothing. Like this card is nuts.
Frothing is definitely the card. I think that just rolls you when it comes down on 3, and you can literally, and there's already some minions on the board. There's just no way to win sometimes if you can't remove them.
This is Show's list, right? Show would probably say just mulch it.
Yeah, I mulch it all the time. Actually, I mulch or swipe. It's like Feral Rage, 2 mulches and 2 swipes to remove that card if it comes down. So the mulligan's super important, obviously. And that's what I mean. Like, you have to make a conscious decision as to whether you're supposed to ramp on turn 2, or you're supposed to ramp on turn 4, or you're supposed to remove what's on the board. And making that decision is like the difference between winning and losing in this deck. But it's a pretty high skill deck. It's fun. It's definitely if you don't play it right, you're gonna lose a lot. But if you if you play it super well, you get to top legend. If it's definitely possible. I've seen Show get top 5 legend with this thing in the last week.
I'll say one last thing about the deck. I am not a huge fan of the Azure Drakes in any Reno, in any Cthulhu, like in any Coon list, and I would cut those out for Loot Hoarders just about every time.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
I've tried. Like, you already are so stacked on 5 with Nourish and Druid of the Claw if you're playing any defensive plays. Loot Hoarder is the unspoken MVP of those lists. It's just no one really bothers with them. I'd even go if you're playing the Cthulhu version, especially, and I'm gonna go like the Cthulhu, not Malagos. You want Cold Light Oracles. Maybe not so much for the Malagos list, but for Cold Light.
Yeah, I can see that in Cthulhu.
I think you need Cold Lights.
Yeah. I can definitely see that in Cthulhu. Yeah, I know what you mean. Like, this one is definitely a little bit more, like all in with the ramp. Like the Azure Drake's pretty much there, so you have a 5 play. The Druid Claw's there, so you can play that taunt against aggro too. But this one is a little bit more all in for that.
I think it's more well-rounded though. Like, it plays like a ramp druid and has the top end, so it's kind of
top end's fun too. It's just great getting Aviana. I've loved Aviana forever now. So when there's actually one that's viable, it's like, oh baby, it's good stuff.
Feels good, man.
Yeah. Okay, last one we got. We got a Concede Priest from Noxious here. Yes.
It's a shaman.
It's a shaman. And Control Shaman. Yes, the dream.
All right, so this is a list that is actually taken directly from a player named Robinette. I don't exactly know when the deck was come up with, but early in the expansion, I started brewing a lot of Concede Shamans. As I've told you, I kept coming up with these lists and just be like, all right, I tried Nazoth Jade Control. I've tried everything under the sun, and this is a list that he's running. He says it's working super well for him. So it's running the Earth Shock with Barnes. So the Earth Elementals are in there with Ancestral Spirit. So we're talking about the old school, Bog Champ combo where you just put down an Earth Elemental, Ancestral Spirit and it just sticks on the board and you're fine. This is truer now more than ever before, because unless you run into the odd, mid-range Shaman or the Sylvanas PO specifically, or Sylvanas Shadowflame in Reno Lock, oftentimes this just sticks and it stops any and all aggro. There's no execute in Dragon Pirate. There's just nothing. So you get to soak up all the health total of the Earth Elemental. And Earth Shock with Barnes creates this super interesting dynamic where you go Barnes, get the Earth Elemental as a 7/8, Earth Shock it, becomes a 7/7. Loses taunt, but against a rogue deck, this creates a huge tempo swing.
Wow, that's
so you can make against Dragon Priest. Against Dragon Priest, you get like a 4/11 Malagos. And that's just a card they can't deal with. So suddenly you find yourself in a super advantageous spot, and not even accounting, of course, for the typical Emperor OTKs that you can put together.
Yeah.
The deck just does very well.
Wow. I didn't even think about it. I played against this deck maybe twice last night, but never had that Earthshock play happen.
Oh, it's nasty. And
fantastic,
no one expects
actually.
it.
Wow.
Yeah. One notorious exception to the or difference in the card list compared to your typical Control Shaman is the deck doesn't hero power or doesn't want to, so there's no things from below, and that's a really big difference because now you're actually more concerned with this deck about using Ancestral Knowledge twice with Farsight twice to get the combo out early, as opposed to playing it hero power pass, Elemental Destruction, reset. Now we're talking about a very draw heavy deck that just doesn't want to waste slots and time trying to get those 5/5s out.
Okay. Wow, this is cool.
Yeah.
Have you played anything like this? Played any Control Shaman at all?
I've never seen anything quite like this. I mean, I know Control Shaman, but this is like to the extreme. I like it.
Yeah, I'm going to try this later tonight. See if I can pull off that play, because that's really cool. I've definitely not heard of Earthshocking the Barnes target, so that token.
There's an interesting list floating around Kuyuki made, which runs Devolve in Control Shaman. He runs double Devolve, and the idea is that you nullify Small-Time Buccaneer and turn it into a Wisp. All the totems from Shaman become Wisps. Just honestly, on average, everything players play becomes bad unless they're like a Reno deck in the mid game. You just give them something good anyway. But for the most part, like a giant just doesn't get modified. Drakes become 3-drops.
Okay.
Like a
that makes
Twilight
sense.
Drake that becomes a 3-drop is bad. It's just really, really bad.
As long as you have the removal in a class like Shaman has the removal, like with cheap
Yeah.
removal too, right? With Maelstrom Portal. So that makes sense.